I usually start off with the question around authenticity, right? Such a buzzword, and what I found is that it means something different to everybody. So when you hear the word, like, what comes to mind for you?
Oof. Um, for me, I would say what comes to mind is not what's the word? What's the phrase? Being like a sellout, basically. Anything that feels like I'm compromising. If I feel like okay, there's a brand deal and there's a lot of money on the table, and that would allow me, or that would kind of coerce me to go down a path that I typically wouldn't have if it weren't on the table, then that's me losing my authenticity. So I guess for the part which is, how to maintain the authenticity, it's making sure that I'm not pushed into any other direction because of, an incentive that, in my opinion, is not worth compromising your authenticity. And then the other side of it is, the way to, I guess, cultivate authenticity is to lean into your creativity. And not to sound too, I know we're on a podcast, but not to sound too podcasty, but I basically mean whatever makes you feel liberated, whatever gives you creative liberty. So for me, that's trying a new editing style out. For me, that is trying to take influence from another industry and put it into my my 9 to 5 in the engineering industry. It's basically seeing the world in almost like categorized buckets, and then moving things from one bucket to another that typically isn't put in that place. I would say maintaining authenticity for me is allowing yourself to make those moves, to challenge the status quo, and to also not let yourself fall into the trap of, hey, there's some sort of money or incentive on the table that is going to force you to do something you wouldn't have otherwise.
Yeah, let's start with the creativity. Growing up, do you think you were allowed to be creative?
To an extent, to an extent, I would say I was very fortunate to have parents that thought outside the box. My
Mm,
dad was always one who had maybe risque ideas sometimes. For example, so he's a lawyer, and he was always reading and writing, and he would consistently send thought pieces to New York Times, the op-ed. And 99% of the time, his ideas would fall on deaf ears. They wouldn't be accepted. It wouldn't be posted or anything.
what would they be about?
Anything and everything. It could be about sports. It could be about politics. Anything that would pique his interest that day, basically. And it's funny enough, it wasn't until I would say maybe what was it, 5 years ago, 5, 6 years ago, he finally got accepted, and he has an op-ed piece published that was about Jeremy Lin and the Knicks. He's a Knicks fan. I'm a Knicks fan, and he wrote some piece about his influence on the game and stuff like that, and kind of the racial undertones of how he was accepted, quote unquote, into the league, and how he was highlighted as well, and basically spoke to that, and that was the one that was accepted in light of the plethora of ones that he did on a lot of other topics. That was the one that the New York Times accepted.
Interesting. And this was before also Twitter and social media where you just like put your opinion out there. Like he was sending this
Yes,
to like the
sending it to
mainstream
New York.
where you kind of needed that approval to like get on, essentially.
100%, yeah. And and more than that, he had a couple of friends in his circle that had some startups. He would also do his own kind of R&D on the side for ideas that he would come up with, and he would bounce those ideas off of us as well. So I was fortunate enough to see that, hey, look, this was kind of my role model growing up. And he's constantly trying to think outside the box, think about different ways to. Well, he's showing me different ways to think about things, and for that reason, as a thinker, I believe that I had a creative liberty. It was always welcomed in the house. From an action perspective, not really. I had to be in line. There are certain manners I had to abide by, which I'm glad. Looking back, I'm very glad I have those. But
Yeah,
I had to show
tell me
respect.
about those. Like, what was the expectation for you, like in that sense?
Yeah, so don't act up. That's the general way to say it. I was a troublemaker up until about sixth, seventh grade. I was trying to be accepted and cool and popular and stuff. So for that reason, I said and did a lot of things that I wish I hadn't. And for that reason, I was written up. I had to write apology letters to people. It wasn't too great. I think my mom is a behavioral therapist, and now she's the director of one at a clinic. And she would
Mm,
just say, "Hey, look, this is an inquisitive boy who is growing up trying to find himself in the world, and for that reason, he's doing things. He's kind of using these acts as ways." As kind of like an outlet for all the energy that he has. But for me, that just sounds like a way to say, hey, look, he don't know better. So
yeah. Yeah.
so for so fortunately, I learned. But I guess to kind of directly answer that question, the like I was saying, manners, the way that I have to speak to people, providing people respect, courtesy, just considering them and stuff like that in any kind of situation. All those things became commonplace. And it's a bit of a tangent, but I actually had a conversation with a friend recently who mentioned it's very interesting that minorities in our cultures, we're taught from a very young age to be respectful of space.
Mhm,
So what I mean by that is, let's say we're in the grocery store and we're going down the aisle. If you're having a conversation with the person you're with, and you're constantly have almost like a third eye, or in your periphery, you're constantly looking to see if you're in the way of anybody.
mm,
So you'll move over to the side if you see somebody walking by. I find that, for, black and brown POC people, that is commonplace. Not to be, standing in the middle of a one-way stairway when people are trying to come down. But then there are others that take up space without, without batting an eye at the fact that this is a walkway that other people have to walk down. So
mm.
that I feel like is a microcosm of how I was taught to act, with respect to others, making sure that you give them the space that they need in every kind of iteration of that word. And for that reason, it helped me, I would say, behave and just kind of navigate my life a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit better. But
So
yeah.
you said that like how you talk was something like that. Those were early conversations around like this is how you should speak, this is how you should address people, and I'm assuming that that had a really big impact on like the way you speak today, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, and like
Yeah.
some people would say it's an insult, but some people would say it's a compliment around this term around like being well spoken.
Yeah.
Like, is that something you heard often growing up?
I mean, I still do. I still do. I mean, even in my 9 to 5, I had to give a presentation, and maybe a year ago. Some woman. I was relatively new to the company, and it was a firm wide presentation. And some woman who was part of senior leadership was like, "Oh, like really liked your presentation. You're really well spoken." I had that itch in the back of my head, like, damn, like I just got here and this is how you want to talk to me. I'm like, hey, like, we can use other words. We should use other words for that. There are certain connotations that I'm not really too happy with. When you say that. So yeah, I mean, to answer that question, yes. I'm fortunate enough in my mind that I feel like I can code switch where when I'm with my friends, I'll speak a certain way, a more casual, laid back way where I don't feel like I need to tiptoe around every word that I put out there. But then also when I'm in certain spaces where I need to evoke a certain level of professionalism, I can do so traditionally speaking. And I feel very, very odd about doing it sometimes because we talked about in the very beginning authenticity. But I also find that, at least in my case, I'm not saying this is for everybody, but my authentic self is both. When I need
Mm,
to explain a story when I'm talking to my boys in a casual environment, I'm going to speak exactly how I am with you right now. So I don't really feel like that's me. Like, oh, you were just saying finna 2 seconds ago, and now you're using a different vernacular. Like, what happened? No, that's just how I speak in general. And in the
yeah,
environment, I'm typically speaking about work, so that's why you're going to hear the work version of how I speak.
yeah.
So yeah, that's what I would say.
I get that. Yeah, I definitely want to get more into that once
Sure.
we talk about career, but it's interesting like, growing up, it sounded like your family had these career paths, but also there was some sort of like testing or maybe even just like interest on the side that they were pursuing.
Mhm.
But when you were thinking about your own career and maybe, early days, like did you have any idea like around what you wanted to do? Even like before you went to college?
I was kind of I would say pushed into my
Yeah.
current career. Yeah. And I think this is a very shared experience, especially amongst minorities. My dad's father, my grandfather, was an engineer. I
Mm,
think a mechanical engineer, if I remember correctly. And he was always great with numbers and everything. And although he was not in my dad's life virtually whatsoever, the one gift that he gave me through my dad was a math book, because my dad had told him that I was good with numbers. My dad took this as a sign to kind of cultivate that growth and make sure that I went down the path of an engineer. Ended up going to engineering school and studying physics specifically because that's what I had an affinity towards. Of all the kind of engineering practices. And I ultimately now, while it's more of a creative role, I do work for an engineering firm, specifically a design and consulting engineering firm. So
But what was this idea when the early times when it's like, hey, this kid is good at math. I think you should study engineering.
yeah.
And at the time when you first heard this, were you just like, oh, I never heard about that. Sounds interesting, or were you just like, wait, why would I do that? Like, tell me about the thought process when you first were introduced to it.
So I didn't have much of a thought process because I wasn't exactly what you said. I wasn't really aware of what engineering was in fifth grade.
Mhm.
I maybe heard about it a couple of times, but I didn't know what it really meant in the real world. It was almost, I would say, maybe a sell job from my dad. He would say, "Hey, engineering, you can make a lot of money, and
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's a very well respected career path and that kind of stuff." So for his mind, he was living vicariously through me. He had never been
Mm,
great with numbers. He was great with words though. So he went down a path that catered to that. But for me, he saw basically a success route, at least a safe one in his eyes, and one that I think he would be very, very happy with and thought that I would be very happy with as well.
mhm,
So for that reason, year after year, remember this is kind of my role model, and seeing that he was very passionate about it, I became more passionate about it too. Not really
mm.
realizing that that decision didn't really come from me. It wasn't by virtue of me saying, "Hey, let me start looking at career paths. This is the one that intrigues me the most." It was, "Hey, this is the one that intrigues my dad the most, and the one that he thinks is going to work best for me. Let me give it a shot because I really respect this guy," kind of thing.
Yeah, like as much as it is obviously like, yo, we all want to have money in the bank so we could like
Yeah.
have a certain lifestyle and spend and
Right.
go out and all these kind of things. But at the same time, it's interesting that you're saying like to some level, like I just wanted to make him proud.
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's what it boils down to. And on one hand, I'm happy I did it because it did make the decision easier to lean into my strengths academically. For
Mm.
example, the SATs, back when I took it, there wasn't out of 1600. I think it was
Back when
2400.
I took it.
I know it's almost sounds like I'm aging myself, but I'm not that old.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
just funny because I know now it's out of 1600. And I think it was out of 2400 when I took it. Like I got a perfect score on the math portion, well on the reading comprehension part, and then writing I did okay with the grammar. So obviously that meant that when I'm applying to schools, any pseudo math related degree that I'm applying for, I'm gonna have a decent shot at it. And
Mm.
it definitely helped. I got into a lot of really good engineering programs. And for that reason, I would say the stars kind of aligned with what he hoped for me and what I hoped to do, which was get into a decent school so that I can have, we were talking about this before, like a security blanket academically. And then hopefully that would help foster a decent career growth thereafter.
Damn, so you were a really good student.
I tried to be. I tried to be. I was a pretty decent student. And I got into some pretty good schools I was really happy about. But ultimately I decided on NYU, which is a great school too, because they gave me the opportunity to play soccer there. And, obviously I thought it was a well-respected school. Academic programs were really great. And it also wasn't too far from home. I didn't want to be too close where, I have my mom showing up with a Semboyado every other day, but I also wanted to be far enough that yeah, I wanted to be close enough though that I could visit family on a whim. So that was nice.
What was it like going to NYU? Did you find yourself comparing yourself a lot to other folks, whether it be the overall student population or being in an engineering class or advanced math class, and you're looking around and like no one probably looks like you?
Yeah, exactly. Definitely did. I wouldn't. I'd say the one part of the experience that wasn't really new to me was looking around the school and seeing people that didn't look like me. And the reason for
Mm.
that is just because my dad, my parents, no, both my mom and my dad, they from a very, very my whole life, education was top priority. So for that reason, I was on heavy financial aid because I did not grow up, middle or upper class. Was able to attend a private school in which in my class there were only four black students and maybe eight or nine Latin students.
Where did
So
you go?
I went to Dwight Englewood.
Yeah, yeah, Upper West Side.
Yeah, yeah, well no, it's in It's in Jersey, but it's right off of the GW Bridge.
Oh,
So yeah, so for that reason, actually, I would say maybe half of the student body actually lives in Manhattan or somewhere in New York City and attends a school, and the rest are from New Jersey. But yeah, for that reason, that experience of me being a minority in every one of my classes was not novel. So for that, so when I got to NYU, attending classes, it was kind of the same. The only difference is that there was no women.
mm,
Engineering school,
yeah.
there are not too many women engineers. So interest in STEM in general. It was rooms of a bunch of men that were predominantly East Asian and or just Asian in general, and then also several white students as well, and then it was just me most of the time. So yeah, that was an interesting experience. But with that being said, I think NYU, I always feel like you end up where you're supposed to, and I was very very happy to go there because I genuinely believe that growing up in the city does force you to mature
Mm.
a lot more quickly. And while I can't say myself I grew up in the city, I grew up in New Jersey. New York was a second home, and attending school there also was a very independent experience. There's no tight knit community. Every class is somewhere you may have to take a train to or take a bike to or something like that. You're interacting with strangers way more than you are people who are part of the student body. And I did really appreciate that because it allowed me to mature much more quickly than I think I would have at a different school. So I'm
Yeah, yeah.
very, very happy about it. And I was able to find my village by putting myself out there. I had no other choice. So, me looking for those folks that were like me starting the Latin dance club and everything like that. I wasn't something I would have even dreamed of or thought of if I wasn't constantly yearning to be with people like me. So it almost forced me inevitably to put myself out there a little bit more to find those spaces I wanted to be in.
I love that. And yeah, I mean, NYU is a great school, and I'm sure that that sets you up for a lot of potential like internship opportunities and whatnot. Without naming a specific internship, let's just label it as like earlier in your career. I'm curious, were you nervous about like going into the corporate world and, navigating like, can I be myself? Can I really talk about my weekends? All of these sort of things. Like, what was some of those like early career experiences that really surprised you?
Say it always surprised me when things weren't done by the book in the corporate world. In
Mm.
my mind, the corporate world was nothing but suit and ties, nothing but meetings and calls and getting work done and then clocking out really late at night and getting back home. So whenever I saw people get into the office later, whenever I saw people talk about things that weren't work like sports or what they did in the weekend and stuff like that, it shocked me. But it was a good shock because I was like, okay, I am working with other human beings. We don't need to put up that strong of a facade every single time. So it was a huge shock for me working at these internships and seeing that people weren't doing it by the book that I guess kind of created in my mind by virtue of my perception of what the corporate world looked like. So with that being said, though, I was always, especially early, very nervous. My dad had worked in the corporate world for several years, and he would constantly preach to me what corporate death wishes were. So, for example, if you go to a happy hour with clients, don't you dare take more than one drink
Mm-hmm.
because getting drunk, acting a fool, all it takes is one mishap or you saying one wrong thing, and that is a great way for you to get fired and to derail your entire career. So, that was one thing. Another thing, emails are permanent. So when you send an email, make sure it's polished as much as you possibly can, and make sure that the tone evoked is very clear because you're going to spend a lot of your time sending emails, and last thing you want is for something to be forwarded to somebody you don't want it to be, and it's not a good reflection of you. And then lastly, create those breadcrumbs to make sure that people know where the work came from. It's a very, very common experience for others to take credit for our work. And he would tell me time and time again that would happen to him. And he feels that, certain promotions didn't come as quickly as they could have if it weren't for so many people taking credit for his work. And, for that, he said, hey, always take pride in your work, the stuff you do, and try to make it clear as well when you're sending that email over that it came from you, that your work was genuine and honest and what it took and stuff like that. So those were a couple of the pieces of advice that I got.
But isn't some and I got similar advice, right? So my mom, for example, she would be like, "Don't even go to the happy hours. Don't
Yeah,
even
yeah,
go to the bars with them," right?
yeah,
But then that advice was often at conflict with what I just saw people doing, right?
yeah,
So to the point of like promotions, yes, you got to do great work, but a lot of it is like relationship based. All
yeah.
right, well, like how do you build relationships? Well, they go to the happy hours, they drink, and they don't, maybe they do act a little stupid, whatever it is, but they go and they engage. So
Mhm.
if I'm getting feedback from my family to not do something, but I'm seeing other people doing it and getting
Yeah,
promoted, it's confusing as fuck because I'm just like, all right, like which one do I do? Right.
100%.
So
Yep.
like, were you confused at some point around like you getting this sort of advice from folks, but then seeing other people do certain things and be like, well, if they can do it, like, why can't I? Like, tell me about that.
Yeah, no, definitely. I know, I feel like at every company, there are certain people that are, constantly at these happy hours or doing their own happy hours and stuff. For me, the general model when it comes to this stuff is everything in moderation. For
Hmm.
you to build a relationship with somebody, you don't have to go to happy hour every Thursday. There are other ways to do it. So, when I'm seeing somebody go to happy hour every day, get a drink after work every day, me personally, at least in this example, I don't really drink often ever. I would say I drink maybe once a month now, I would say. So those kind of activities didn't really entice me. But what did entice me was career growth. So I would do things that I felt would help. For example, I'm overseeing a couple of resources now in my current role, and I noticed that when I was, the intern or the entry level position, I really appreciated tokens of gratitude. So whether that was just like a thank you or being highlighted in a meeting, by saying, "Hey, look, this was by virtue of the great work from David." Those things carried me a long way. Those kind of bursts of dopamine that I felt in my 9 to 5 made me want to keep working for that person, doing great work, and working for the company and stuff like that. So what I do now is, like, say I go on a vacation. I was recently in Lisbon, and I was able to bring a couple of memorabilia back, some souvenirs back, and was able to provide it to my resources. And like, I feel like those things will, they just go a long way. They make you feel appreciated and stuff like that. But to be honest, I forgot what the question was. Yeah, I feel like I went off a little bit, but yeah.
It's all good. Tell me also about like what did your early career swag look like?
It was
And did it change compared to like how you are now?
so it was exactly what the attire that was asked, I would say.
Oh, so
So
there were like specific rules for like
yeah.
certain companies. Ah, okay.
Yeah, definitely. So,
I've never worked at a company like that. That's why
oh,
I'm asking.
really? Really?
Yeah,
Yeah, so at my current company and at my prior companies, it was button down, but it was a dress button down, like a dress shirt kind of thing. When we had client, you always had to bring a jacket or have a jacket, like a suit jacket, especially if we're having like a customer facing meeting or something like that. And then of course like some slacks, dress shoes, belt, that kind of stuff, and just make sure that it's all kept as well. There's literally like a dress code that's published and everything.
no way. Oh, so it wasn't like an unspoken rule. This was like actually like, hey, this is what you got to do.
It was spoken. It was written in the handbook. Yeah.
Interesting.
In
Even like
both companies that I worked at. But
even like hair and facial hair, any of those kind of things too, or
I don't think so. I mean, there
okay,
may have been some language around, pretty subjective, but like being kept.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think there was maybe something about, make sure that you don't look disheveled and stuff like that.
right.
Super subjective, but
That's what I'm saying. A lot of
yeah,
this is just like opinion based, right?
100%. Yeah. But with that being said, now, and just kind of let you know, because the context is important, I run the innovations department at an engineering firm. When you think innovations, you think, in my opinion, a little bit more casual. I don't think innovations, and I think suit and tie. I personally think, hey, look, you're trying to almost kind of, what's the word? I was going to push the grain, but I feel like I'm mixing two idioms up. But you want to go against the grain, I'll say, with your ideas, with the products that you're overseeing and stuff like that. So I feel like that's something that carries over into dress. So I just dress a little bit more casually now. At first, when I first started there, especially because that handbook does exist, I was like, hey, look, let me make the best impression. And unfortunately, I've been I think my whole entire career, I kind of ceded to what the best impression looked like, and it was a bit of a compromise of my authenticity, to be honest. But
Hmm.
now I'm very comfortable, and I've also proved my worth more than sufficiently enough at the company that I'm like, hey, I can come in some sneakers. I'll have some nice pants on. I'll wear, a shirt like maybe like this or something like that. And although I'm going to be, I guess, traditionally speaking, not as dressed as others, this is what innovations looks like here. And that's kind of my statement. So although it's not, I would say, a conscious statement that I feel like I'm making every day, It's, hey, look, I'm going to get my best work done here, and you already see the results. So this is what I'm going to be wearing.
But that's natural though, right? Like this idea of, so for me when I was working, I would often tell myself, yo, I need at least one performance review.
Yeah.
After that, like it's on paper that I'm doing a good job. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna wear sneakers finally or some shit like that, right? I'm
Right.
gonna finally wear a t-shirt. So like you're kind of going through the same thing in the in the
Exactly.
sense of like maybe it's not one performance review, maybe it's fucking four of them,
Yeah.
but it's some sort of like validation to be like, well, why are you coming at me if they were to? Why are you coming at
Yep.
me for this? Looking at my performance review, I just did such a good job. So
Yes.
there's a little bit of that. Like you've gotten to the point where you feel more confident in like going against the grain a bit.
Yes. That's 100% right.
So
100% right. Yeah, I was just going to say it's sad that we feel that it's almost like when we get into new spaces, we shrink. And then once we feel like we made a good enough impression, we then
mhm.
kind of, deflate back to who we are. But that's kind of the sentiment that I've felt in every, especially in a corporate environment. That's what I'd
Yeah.
say.
And it's not just you. So what I found as well is that it's not just like we go from one version where we're like, suppressing, hiding parts of ourselves, and automatically the next day we're like 100%, ourselves.
Right.
I've found that people do it in a little bit of waves.
Yeah.
So they'll do it. They'll try, sneakers. They're like, nobody said nothing. All right, cool. And
Yeah.
if they did, it wasn't too crazy. All right, you know what? Next time
Hmm.
I'm gonna do something else. And slowly they start sort of like reclaiming, let's
Right.
say, their authenticity back.
Good way to
So
put it. Yeah.
I love that. I think another way that, like, so people when they talk about authenticity, they often talk about kind of like their appearance. But I think another way that people hide, and something I used to do, is like talking about their weekends.
Hmm.
So I think I think it's interesting to think about like, all right, here you are exploring this engineer tech field, but at some point, like you're also doing a lot of shit on the side.
Yeah.
Like before, club one baby daddy,
Hmm.
one bedroom, like you were DJing weddings, you were DJing a bunch of events. I wonder how open you were being about those. Like if someone were to ask you about your weekend, because
Hmm.
my go-to lie at the time was like, oh, hanging out with the fam doing laundry. I'm like, how much laundry can I actually do, right? And there's nothing wrong with like anything that I was doing on the weekend. I
Yeah.
was just like comparing myself and a little bit embarrassed to be like, oh, I was
Yeah.
doing this. So like when did you start DJing on the side, and were you open at work about it?
Yeah. So I started DJing my senior year of college. So it was about 8 years ago. And it was to stay afloat. I was a broke college student. I already had two jobs. I was a part-time internship, and I was a waiter at a restaurant in Harlem. And I was like, hey, look, I'm gonna need a little bit more money. So I tried my best, and I did end up starting to become a DJ that year. I was fortunate enough though that my cousin had just stopped DJing, and she was basically giving away her equipment for the family discount. So I started then. I was fortunate enough to be able to pave a way for me to be the staple DJ for multicultural events on campus,
Mhm.
and that's how I really got a foot in and got a lot of quick gigs. Wasn't getting paid anything, of course. I still remember my first gig. I made $75 for what was planned to be 6 hours, but it was daylight saving, so it was seven. So that's where the beginnings were. But yeah, so I started off that way, and then right after graduation, I said, "Hey, look, well, it was COVID not too shortly after that. I had my clientele prior. I was doing private events and some public events, and then when COVID hit, I said, "Hey, look, I want to make the most bang for my buck as I start leaning into my 9 to 5 because that was always, in my opinion, going to be the primary source of income, primary career, and all that kind of stuff. So let me do weddings. Best way to like I said, make the most bang for your buck. You spend 4, 5, 6 hours on a wedding." You make a pretty penny, and then I still have my weekdays to focus on my 9 to 5. And in terms, just to kind of jump to your answer, to your question for comfortability, I never want to give people, and maybe this is a bit of I don't know, of a toxic trait, but not a healthy trait, but I never want to give people reason to think that I may fall short in any area because of something else going on. I don't want to give people anything that they can weaponize against me. So I had no plans to tell anybody or to show anybody that I was DJing on the side. I wanted them to think that my 9 to 5 was my life. And this is not something, to be honest, I really need to care about. I needed to just care about doing the work and that kind of stuff. But it is something that I thought about. So for that reason, I hit it. And it
What did
was,
what did you used to say?
I would just say I attended a wedding, which is true, you know?
Yo, they're like, yo, David, yo, all his friends are getting married. Like,
Yeah,
yo, every
yeah.
weekend, this is crazy.
Exactly, yeah. So, I was like, okay, and I'm not lying, but it is kind of a lot of weddings, so I hope I'm not asked this question every week. So that's really what my answer was. Or if, I was doing other things that week and I'd mention the other thing, I don't like lying. I don't want to lie. So I just found whatever kind of roundabout way to answer those questions. But then with Club 1BD, we've been fortunate enough that we've had a bit of virality, and some of the videos have gotten so famous, so popular that my coworkers have seen it and I can't hide it anymore. So especially in the last year and a half, I've been part of this company actually almost about the same time that since Club 1BD has existed. I had a couple of our videos and I was just at my desk working, and like people would come up to me like, "Is this you?" Show
Wait,
me
wait, wait.
the
So the
go ahead.
video's going viral, right? And like you know that.
Mm,
And at one point you were kind of scared, whatever adjective we want to throw in there, because
yeah.
you didn't want it to take away from your like professional brand and the impact that you were driving. So, but now there's a different layer of like, oh shit, I'm gonna actually put content out there in the form of videos online. Like,
Mhm.
did you even have fear about like posting videos about it because you didn't want people to find out? Like, what was that decision making like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess I kind of have blinders. I always put these two worlds in completely different kind of landscapes. So
Yeah.
so I didn't think that they would cross. I mean, even for me, I have, one of my friends and my kind of co-partner on this.
Oh,
He's
so
just
you didn't
like,
even think you even if a video went viral, you're like, "Oh, but my coworkers aren't gonna see it," like, type shit. Yeah.
because they see me leading a department, in my 9 to 5. I don't think I didn't think that they would think, hey, is that him? But they did. I mean, like, my face is there, like, I couldn't really hide it. So the good thing is my content is mostly, it caters the target audience and the audience of a lot of my gigs, a lot of my content are, black and brown folk. It was mostly really just them who saw my videos. And
Mm,
I already, as I do whenever I go into any other space, I gravitate towards them. I build relationship with them very quickly. So it was always, it was never a big issue. Now, so for example, I had a video that went viral maybe 4 or 5 months ago. My head of IT, who's a black man at my company, he's Dominican actually, and his kind of second in command is a Trinidadian guy, black Trini, and he saw the video, and he immediately saw it and was like, hold up, this might be David. Let me send it to our head of IT. So he sends it to him, and he sees it. And funny enough, he's based out of Atlanta. It was our first tour, and that same weekend, I was gonna be in Atlanta for the show. So of course, this man wants to be funny, and he goes, hey, like, are we getting lunch this weekend? What's going on? So, I immediately was like, shoot. Like, I did want to reach out to him anyway to hang out, but I wasn't planning on giving him all that information, especially his senior leadership and stuff too. But anyway, it was kind of a playful way for me to say, hey, I didn't know you knew, but let's keep it on the low. I just don't want this, people to think that this might potentially distract me from my work. And that's basically how it's gone. The last thing I'll say on this topic is when I first started the job, Club 1BD was just growing, and I was invited to be the official DJ for a K-pop star for their tour, and I ended up doing it, but that meant I would have had to work remote for 2 full weeks. So for that reason, I had to tell my boss 2
mm,
months into the job, "Hey, this is an opportunity I didn't think I would ever get. It's kind of a once in a lifetime opportunity, but I will be working remotely in those other offices we have across the US during that time." And he even told me specifically, "Hey, don't, this is fine." He took him a day or two to figure it out, but he's like, "Hey, this is fine. We still think, we just want you to keep it under wraps. Let's not start telling people that you're touring and working." Right.
right, right.
And I really, really appreciate it. I don't know too many bosses that would be like, yeah, sure, go ahead. So I'm very glad that I was honest with him and he was open with it. And, that for that reason, they know I'm a DJ, but they don't know the extent because this is an older white man. And he was just like, hey, this is probably a one-off thing. I told him I'm a wedding DJ, which is true. And yeah, and that's basically how that went.
But that's so interesting because for so long you tried to keep the world separate, and now you kind of don't have that much control over it just based on the
Yeah,
algorithms. You know what I mean?
yeah, it's
Like
true.
here you are going to like Atlanta and you got like a higher up potentially going to your party, and
Yeah.
like you're not doing anything wrong in your videos, right? But like I'm imagining you editing a video and being like, like either you dancing or you got
Yeah.
women on the side just like shaking ass. Again, there's nothing wrong with that. It's not unprofessional, but
Mhm.
there is a little bit probably of anxiety around like, damn, this video's gonna hit, but what if my coworkers see it? You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. It's true. It's true.
there's a lot of just like mental gymnastics that you probably shouldn't even have to go through, but
Yeah. I think I might be putting too much faith into the fact that a lot of the vast majority of the coworkers that I have are hermits. They don't go out too much. They're
yeah,
not
yeah,
on that side of social media much, if at all. It's only the ones that I gravitate towards that I already have relationships with that know and are, at least I trust, not going to spread the gospel per se. So I think I'm fortunate, and maybe I'm giving too much faith to that. And then also, I don't even know what the negative repercussions would be. I mean, of course, I'm thinking worst comes to worst, they're like, hey, you're doing too much, I guess, on the side. You're fired. Like I don't know what it would that be the worst case scenario, because like you said, I'm not conducting myself in any way that negatively reflects on the company.
right,
If anything, I feel like might even be considered a positive reflection that, hey, look, this person is so invested in both sides of things that he's successful in both places. So I can't. Also, by the way, side note, I came up with an idea for my 9 to 5 that was influenced by my DJ career on day 2 on the job, and that has turned into its own program that's in the culture now. So it's
nice.
actually helped me in some way, in that way. So yeah, I would say maybe I'm giving too much faith to the fact that my coworkers aren't really on that side of social media. But if they end up getting onto that side, I'm just hoping and praying that it's not something that will negatively reflect on me.
Yeah, and I agree with everything you're saying. Like, I don't think it reflects negatively on you. In fact, I think it reflects positively on the company. There's so many people
Yeah.
that are criticized for doing anything on the side,
Yeah. Yeah.
and here you are balancing both. Like, I think from a recruiting standpoint and a corporate brand standpoint, like I would want to work there because of that level of autonomy, flexibility,
That's a good
and
point.
just like seeing us as humans. Like we're not just our jobs.
That's a
I'm
great
curious
point.
if this is something that you're also thinking about, but I remember, and I'm sure people are even surprised to know that you still have a full-time job.
Yeah.
But for a long time, I was scared of letting go of my full-time job. Yes, because of the money and all these things, but a lot of it was because of this like identity that I've worked my whole life to achieve, right? Like when I used to get excited when people asked me what I did for a living, because I would be like, oh, I work at TikTok. And they'd be like, oh my God, right? If people ask you, I think for a long time, you were like, yeah, I'm an engineer. I do product at X, Y, and Z company.
Mhm.
And there's a certain level of like, oh, he's smart. You know what I mean? Whereas like I felt insecure for so long to be like, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a founder, I'm a this, I'm a that. There's a little bit of like explaining to you, like,
100%.
yes, you're like Club One Bedroom killing it, you're killing it, team's killing it, but there is a certain like if it's someone new and you're like, oh, I'm a DJ, there's a certain level of perception that is way different than if you say that. Like, do you think about those things? Letting go potentially eventually of that like title?
All the time. But also on the other side of things, I always try to think about it's more of a reflection of the receiver's,
Yes.
yeah, character than it is on me. So I try now not to kind of over explain myself, because why am I preemptively getting defensive about the career paths that are, well suited for me? Right. So, I'm just innately, and this is just because of how we've been trained, how kind of society's taught us, I hate to kind of put it that way, but it's just kind of what is traditionally seen when they look at two different professions. Like, for example, when they look at software engineer compared to DJ, which one is more well respected? Very clearly, it's going to be the software engineer. So when I used to say, I DJ on the side, I would emphasize on the side as much as I could.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
It was like, I don't want people to think, oh, he's just another DJ. Also wasn't great in the dating world either. They're not like, oh, I love DJs. They always think like, the DJs and, you know, an F boy, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yo, same thing. When I was talking about the insecurity,
Yeah.
I'd be so insecure on dates specifically
Yeah.
because it wouldn't in my mind, I'd be like, oh fuck, that doesn't communicate stability. Fuck. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
exactly. Exactly. We think so much about how we are going to be received by others, and we always gravitate towards what the traditional reception is to our careers, and that's why we get so defensive over these things. But I've come to learn, and it's become more and more a part of me now, fortunately, where I don't feel the need to defend it as much. I've already justified it in my mind. It's already justified, my careers more than enough sufficiently, to myself, that if that person is going to think lowly of me because part of my jobs is that I'm a DJ, then that's a reflection on their character and how kind of shallow I really feel like people can be.
When did you get there? How did you get to that point?
It was gradual. It was gradual. I think I give a lot of credit to the people around me, I would say. I'm fortunate enough to have some really great close friends that put these things into perspective for me. And then also it's just what I've come to believe. I try to pay attention to trends no matter where the trend comes from. For example, when I dated women that would think down on the DJ side of my passions, I didn't gravitate towards them. The ones that were more open-minded, I did gravitate towards. And that's how I am with people. I'm gravitating more towards the more open-minded ones that see the nuance in certain things and see that, I could stereotype this person because of the DJ, but I'm not going to, because there's an example right in front of me that says otherwise. So it's me seeing it in the real world. It's my friends lamenting it as well. People I respect a lot, my parents as well. I'm really fortunate that I have pretty open-minded parents. And then finally, it's me ultimately coming to that decision like, hey, I have more than enough evidence in front of me to say that I need to stop giving so much weight to the stereotype versions and definitions
Yeah.
of what my careers are.
Despite the evidence that you're doing so well, do you ever feel like an imposter? Like, what the hell am I doing here? Do I deserve to be here? Am I good enough to
Yeah.
do the things that I'm doing? Like, do you still get those?
Always, always. I think
Always.
yeah, I would say always. And I actually, and this also might not be the healthiest way to think about it. I say always because not because I think that I don't deserve what has come my way. I feel like I've worked hard to earn it. I think that it keeps me humble. It's, when I walk into a meeting where or I'm giving a presentation, it's just me and senior leadership at this 100-year-old firm, engineering firm, and my words mean a lot for them, so much so that it's needed in these spaces. Because I feel like I quote unquote kind of don't belong, even though I feel like I do, it's subconsciously, it's an extra motivator. It's an extra incentive for me to continue working hard. Because one of my biggest worries is complacency, thinking, hey, look, I've
Mm,
worked my ass off. I deserve to be here. I'm just gonna do what I need to do, and that's it. That attitude is very different from, hey, look, I want to continue making the best impression, especially on folks that could move me up in my career. I'd rather have that perspective still, or at least as long as I can, so that this syndrome is kind of rendered as a motivator for me to continue working hard in every space I'm in. And I feel the same way in the DJ world. I've been really fortunate enough to meet some really kind of highly positioned people in this space in entertainment and media, and I conduct myself as if, wow, like, it's an honor and pleasure to be here. And I genuinely think it is. So I'll speak that way, and they appreciate it. Also act that way, and they appreciate that too. So I feel like it helps build the relationships rather than me immediately saying, hey, I'm on the same field I'm on the same level as you are, even though you have like 20 years experience and I'm just getting into the game, and me being so casual about it. Instead, it keeps me humble in a way that I feel like, at least at this point in my career, it's helping.
yeah. Well, if it is helpful, my therapist told me one day, as humans, we always compare up. We never compare down.
That's good.
So
I like that.
by default, you're always going to feel like shit. We're always going to compare ourselves to someone that has more followers, more friends, more money, more this, but we
Mhm.
never compare ourselves to people that have less, right? Like
Yeah,
we should be comparing ourselves to ourselves a year ago, 2 years ago, etc. But like again, if you compare yourself, you're always going to feel like shit.
exactly. That's so true. That's so true. And as much as I want to say I don't compare myself anymore, it's so
Oh, we
false.
all do, bro.
It's
We
so
all do.
false. Yeah. Yeah, we definitely all do. And it works to our advantage
Yeah, to
if you
motivate you. Yeah.
change the comparison to a motivation, but also see it as a way to take influence. The
Mm,
best ideas come from, whether it's directly or indirectly, somebody taking influence from something else that exists, right? So for example, some of my, most viral transitions, I created it myself, but that spark of creativity or inspiration came from me maybe listening to another DJ do something else, right? And using a similar technique, but then putting my own spin on it, using two different songs instead, right? Like it's that comparison to somebody who might have more followers, something like that, or have less followers, but I respect a lot. And I'll listen to it and be like, okay, actually, I really like how they did this. Let me try to replicate it in a different way with a different song, whatever it is. So I think as long as that comparison is not just, as long as the resulting decision or determination from the comparison is not, shit, I'm not like that, or I'm never going to be like that. If it's instead, hey, that was really dope. Let me see how I can do my own version. Then it'll always be healthy, in my opinion. I think, yeah. I mean, just kind of stylistic, but yeah, that's what I would say.
Yeah, I love it.